How do I find a new job? How can I make a career change? And the biggest question of all, can I really find a career that I love? Hey, my name is Jen Smith, and I believe career success doesn't have to be at the expense of living a radiantly happy and healthy lifestyle. As a former HR leader and recruiter turned career coach, I get what companies are looking for when hiring top talent. What that means for you is an unmatched combination of insider knowledge and the best kept secrets about making heart-based career changes and navigating the ups and downs of job searching in today's world of work. Whether you're a recent graduate navigating the job market for the first time or a seasoned professional ready for a career change, this show is for you. So grab your coffee or your kombucha, pull up a seat, and get ready to be challenged and inspired to move beyond your self-doubt and take the right next steps towards landing a career you love. Because you deserve a long, radiantly happy and healthy career. This is the Flourish Careers Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Flourish Careers Podcast. I'm Jen Smith, your host, and today I'm thrilled to be here for another installment of Flourishing Together, a monthly segment dedicated to curated conversations with industry insiders sharing wisdom and strategies for improving your work and well-being. And today, I am delighted to introduce you to Patricia Ortega. Patricia is a career transformation coach and the host of the Uncommon Career podcast. She helps high-achieving professionals and seasoned leaders forge new paths to fulfilling professional and personal lives. Her most rewarding work is helping others follow the internal nudge for more so they can experience energizing work, a revitalized sense of purpose, and the reward of making a meaningful, positive impact. Clearly, we have a lot in common. When you work with Patricia, you have a career counselor turned executive coach focusing on clarity, resilience, and emotional intelligence. And she also has a knack for helping with mindset work and personal branding. You also might be interested to know that Patricia is a board-certified executive coach with a master's in counseling and a decade of professional experience. But more importantly, Patricia is a Christian faith-based business owner, a wife, a dog mom, and hoarder of books, pens, and planners. And we were laughing before we hit record that we have that in common. And I'm actually a self-proclaimed notebook nerd. So shout out to all the other planner and notebook nerds out there. The other fun fact that I have to share, we were just talking about, is that both of our podcasts were showcased on the top career podcast guide. So shout out to Max List for curating such a fabulous resource. And Patricia and I had a moment of celebration before we hit record that both of our podcasts were on that guide. So Patricia, without further ado, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Jen, so much for having me. Thank you for that introduction and a little celebratory clap for us for being on Max List. Congratulations.
Yeah, so fun. Such a fun thing to have in common. So let's kind of dive in here. I'd love to start with your background. So moving from higher ed into running a business is a huge leap. And so do you mind sharing with listeners kind of that pivotal moment in your career where you realized you needed a change and how you navigated that transition?
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, that's a packed question. There's so much there, right? So I'll start with sort of like the synopsis of things. I started as a retention coordinator, advisor type of role for underrepresented engineering students. And so these are the students who, some were, brilliant, right? Just like any other population, you've got some students who are really brilliant. And then you have some students who kind of struggle, right? With, they were coming in as early as, we called it arithmetic. Like the remedial class that they got into was literally subtracting, adding, multiplying, division, and then slowly building up into pre-algebra. And, and so whether it was academic struggles or whether it was like I had one student who took the bus for 4 hours from LA to Pomona, California, and went to college and so I had students who were, they lived the whole family in one studio, all these different situations. And so from that work, I realized I really, really like the resiliency piece, the grit, like that piece, right? And so from there, I got my master's in counseling. I was a career counselor for a while, really, really enjoyed that. But then I went into community college counseling and I became a tenured faculty at a community college, really helping people everywhere from CEOs of organizations change career tracks to, someone who had just come out of prison and was trying to get their life back together. And again, to students who were trying to make it through and maybe had some difficulties. So it was really a blessing to work with just such a diverse group of amazing individuals. And then the pandemic hit. And life just changed so quickly. I think everyone's values changed so quickly. The world seemed to have sped up. And it's like a decade went by in about a month. Mm-hmm. And so with all of that happening, I think a lot of people were reevaluating what's truly important. Again, my values started to shift. My campus values started to shift. And so it just became time to take the leap and do something different, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to start a business. And so I started looking into it. We also moved states, so kind of across the country, which was crazy because we don't know anybody in this, like almost nobody. There was one couple that helped us arrive here.
Oh my gosh.
And they've been a blessing. But beyond that, it's been a whole new life completely. And so then I started the business and that led to an entirely new set of, when you think you've arrived and you're like, I've got this, for me, it was like, I got this faculty position. I'm confident in what I do. I've moved past all my stuff because we all have stuff, in the closet, in our backpack, whatever you may call it. I'm like, I've moved past all my stuff. I'm confident. I'm in my 30s. So I made it, I'm an adult and I'm adulting. But then I started the business and I realized not only is it a whole new space, but in addition to that, because I started a personal brand business, I don't think I realized what it meant to be the public face of a business.
Oh, right.
And what that does to you personally, in terms of, like ego, like this woman right here, I have an ego. We all have an ego. And I didn't think it was there until it came out. So that's been hard. Really, insecurities and mindset issues and, I felt like in the beginning, I would meet with someone and I almost felt like I had to battle my own ego to be able to be there fully present for the client. Mm-hmm. And that was a bit of a learning curve. And then, of course, everything else, the marketing and all that, so there's a lot there. Mm-hmm. But that's the synopsis. It's been about 2 years now, many pivots along the way, huge breakthroughs. And we are now in just this great place of growth and sharing what we've learned and helping clients and continuing to move forward.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on the 2-year mark. That's a big deal and sticking with it because that's also a big deal. It's very hard, as I know from experience. One of the things that you were mentioning is around in higher ed, working with folks, the resilience and the grit and being that career counselor and then moving to a faculty role and helping leaders make changes. And I can't help but think how much that experience has to be so foundational in your coaching business and helping others, through similar types of changes. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but very similar, especially when, you're making a change to become a leader or you're in a leadership role and you want to shift organizations. Like all of that is really hard to do. And so I imagine your background in counseling in the career space specifically and in higher ed can really support that. So I feel like you had a really strong foundation to start from at least.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, when I first started doing this work, I thought, there's no connection. I don't know why I feel like I need to work with leaders. What is the connection here? How can I pull? And what I realized is when it comes to resiliency and grit, it's like moving from one end of the spectrum to the other. And the end of the spectrum I came from was the most difficult possible. I mean, a person who's learning arithmetic.
Right.
To then go and become an engineer.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that is a huge transformation. And the other piece I learned is with regards to leadership, because I thought, I'm a tenured faculty member. We are primarily individual contributors. We don't have particularly a team. Right. But what I realized is that there is a culture that comes along with tenure that is sort of a leader with influence without the title, which is what I think we're all kind of aiming for, especially even though, leaders, let's say, for example, in corporate or in nonprofits, they might have a team for sure, but you can be a manager or you can be a leader, and that leader inspires and leads by influence. And that's one of the pieces that I thought, oh, this is interesting, right? And then the other piece is being a counseling faculty. And I'm just going to be very honest, being a counseling faculty. And before I was a faculty, I was an advisor, right? And so you have this delineation of like staff and counseling versus at the time I was staff and they were faculty. But in addition to that, it was my topic, counseling versus engineering.
Right.
And so there are personality shifts and perspectives, right, that kind of make it difficult. And I had to step up even more to garner the respect and appreciation and eventually, continue to exert influence and work politics and that kind of thing. And so now I'm like, oh no, it was even more difficult in the scenario that I was in some cases.
For sure. And those transferable skills, you're connecting the dots. And it's easier to do that as we look back, we all know. But for folks that are making a change, maybe this can spark some ideas to help think about connecting those dots and those transferable skills and thinking a little bit outside the box, even though you didn't realize it at the time when you started your business. Now you can look back and say, oh yeah, I did have this foundation and here's how I can connect those dots. So I think that's a really interesting point for folks to understand. And I can't help but say the grit and resilience that you possess from moving your home, which we all know that really rattles your foundation, and then taking the leap of faith to start a business. So you're certainly showcasing a lot of those traits that you saw in others as well. So I couldn't help but connect those dots from those two big changes all at once.
Oh my goodness. Yes. To anyone who's going through a big, transition, transformation, change, new whatever you want to call it, right? Change is really, really hard and it takes a toll on you. So when we go through career change, this, you've worked with so many fantastic individuals, right? When you work with change, it is a practical, tactical career change, but it also impacts your kids, your family, your husband, your home. I mean, people who knew me like a couple years ago are probably going to be like, ooh, she's gained a little weight, and we're still coming down from that, right? Like these are just things that are part of our human experience. And so, we have these shifts. It changes our personal life. And then we are like, okay, now let's reinvent again. And it's just part of life.
It is part of life. And I think it's fun. I think that's the fun part of life when you can make a change and you have the choices to make changes to make your life more fulfilling for you. And that's really the power of choice, quite frankly. And, you and I both have worked, I'm sure, with folks that feel super stuck in what they're doing and, kind of almost that analysis paralysis or can't take that step forward. But once you do make that decision and you start taking the tiny actions and make the big leaps, the tiny actions that lead up to the big leaps, it can be so much more fulfilling. So thank you for sharing that background. I know it's going to inspire so many people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this month on the pod, we have a theme of letting go. And so part of change is letting go, which is really hard. There's identities when you make a shift. There's income, there's stability, a lot of things that you have to let go of. So I'd love for you to share, if you don't mind, some practical steps you took to let go of some of those things that we're intrinsically tied to.
I think what we think of when we're not in this situation, we think of the really practical things, but what really stops us, or what I see a lot and what stopped me, is the mindset piece of especially with career. I mean, career and identity can so easily become intertwined because we spend the majority of our day, which means the majority of our life at work. And so it's so easy to kind of sort of intermingle those two.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I was no longer that tenured faculty, I was no longer a counselor, I was moving into coaching. At that time, it felt like I was taking a leap. And imagine there's a cliff and then this big chasm, right? And then there's another, like a landing zone, right? I felt like I had jumped. And if I looked down, there was nothing there, right? Like there's this business that you have to create from scratch, right? My whole life, I've been an employee. And my whole life, I've been an employee at some of the most secure institutions, right?
Right.
You've got tenure, you've got higher education, where once you get hired, it's pretty difficult not to, not to keep your job. So I went from that mentality of like, tell me what to do, I'll do it by 5 p.m. and then I'll be fine and I'll get my paycheck, right? To you lead the direction of this ship. And by the way, there's no ship. You're in the water, like hammering one piece of wood to the other so that you don't drown, and eventually it becomes a ship, right? And so that, oh my gosh, it was so much pressure,
It really is.
And I just felt like I'm not, and I tell my students this all the time, pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to your feelings. If you can't articulate your thoughts, pay attention to your feelings and then ask yourself, why am I, And so I walk them through that. But when you're in the eye of the storm, you need your own coach.
This is true.
And so that was part of it that I was like, okay, I need to find a coach. I need to find people. And I went through several coaching programs where there was, that's why I say transformation, right? Because for me, transformation is not just, I learned a new habit. Transformation is, I think differently, I behave differently. Therefore, my life changes long term. And when I have a setback, I can come back to the new person I am, not to the old person that I was. To me, that's transformation. And so through going through all those coaching programs, I'm not going to lie to you, they were expensive.
Yes.
They
and
were
intense.
Expensive. Yes. Oh my gosh. Like to the point where I'm like, now if I start coaching, I'm like, I just want to let you know, I'm a crier and I might cry. Because you're helping me like pull out these emotions that I don't even recognize are there, but are driving my behavior. And so that was it. Like it was a good amount of coaching. I'm definitely a faith-based girl. So it was a lot of time in, my prayer closet, reading my Bible, reading scripture over myself. Like, what does the Bible say about this? And what I've learned is whether you, are faith-driven or not, religious or not, or regardless what your religion is, right? We have these beliefs about the world and about us in the world. And I had this complete, I'm just going to call myself out. It was like a false humility. Like, you shouldn't, self-promote because that's bragging. And what I learned is that's really not anywhere in the Bible. And if I'm trying to live my life by the Bible, it's nowhere in there, right? And so what I learned is it's really the motive. So don't try to figure out the surface, what you're going to say. Instead, figure out how you feel about it. Like if you feel that your motive is, if I say this, I'm going to get a lot of people to like my comment, right? We're humans and we can detect that so fast.
Yeah.
And so I really had to work on that internal piece through working with coaches, through, reading the Bible, prayer, and, a lot of quiet time.
Yeah.
I thought I needed a lot of action, but what I really needed was a lot of space mentally, emotionally, and practically to just sit and understand what I thought of myself, how I thought of myself, how that came across, and then what needed to change in order to go into this new season.
Yeah, so much goodness in this. Thank you for sharing and being so open. And, one of the things that really stood out to me here is asking for help. So many times we think we have to do it on our own, but asking for help is okay and you can learn. And you had mentioned the expensive and the intenseness of it, but that investment is you betting on yourself. You are betting on yourself that you're going to learn this, you're going to make this change, and it's going to happen. And I think when you have that kind of, you're betting on yourself and you have that intense drive to learn and to change, it makes a huge difference. And then you have supporters and leaders for the accountability and the structure and the framework and to call you out on things and to keep you moving forward. It's a really big deal. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then the other thing that really stood out here is faith. So having faith in something bigger, whether it's the universe, it's the driving force, it's the energy, it's the Bible, whatever it is, I think having faith that you are supported and being taken care of is so huge when you're making any kind of change. And so, for folks that are going through that change, it's called a leap of faith for a reason.
Oh gosh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, you think you're jumping off the cliff with no net there, but when you have that faith, you know that there's going to be, some angels carrying you along the way or whatever it is, there's going to be some support in order for you to take that next step and make the change happen. And then lastly, I can't help but mention the pause. There is so much power in the pause and just getting quiet and listening to the inner nudge and letting that quietness guide you, because that's your intuition. That's, you have all the answers, but it's so hard in our noisy, complicated world to actually take that pause and get quiet to figure out what's going to be most supportive. So this is really insightful. I appreciate you sharing.
No, you hit it right on the nose. That it's that pause where, and this is the thing, right? Here's some really practical ways to know you probably need a pause. If you're sitting watching YouTube video after YouTube video, trying to figure out what should I do, and they all tell you something different, give yourself a time frame. From this week to this week, I'm just going to learn and absorb, not worry about the pause. But after this week, it is silence, And so that way you give yourself that time to get all your YouTubing out and all your researching out, right? All your talking to people, but then you just go into the back cave and figure things out your way.
I love that too, because it is very hard, especially when you're starting a business. And that's actually the next question I have for you. But when you are starting your own thing, there is so much advice. I mean, even as a career coach, I see for folks that want to make a change in their career, there's so much advice. And I've got quotes here, my friends, like there's a lot of stuff and noise out there and the way you should do things and the way you should think about this and that. And it's only what's going to work for you. And that's a big piece of my philosophy around heart-based career planning is listen to it, do the research, but do what works best for you. Because as you were saying before, people are going to sense what's not real. And trust me, we have so many robots and repetitive stuff and all the nonsense going on. Like we want human quality stuff out in this world, whether that's
true.
Being an employee or starting a business or whatever it is. Like we need that. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I love the time blocking too, because then you give yourself the space to do the research and to do the YouTubing or the scrolling or whatever you're going to do. And then you stop and then you go and you figure out what's going to work for you. So yeah, that's huge. That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we first met, you had mentioned to me, which this really stood out, that you were surprised by how much you actually enjoyed the business side of things. So thinking about how to run a business and the marketing. And so let's just have a little peek behind the tent here. So I'd love to know like what you love about it and how did you learn everything? It sounds like you had some coaching programs and things like that, but tell us a little more.
Yeah. I have to stop and just say your community is so blessed to have you because your style of interviewing is just, I don't know, there's something about it that's joyful and calm and of course heart-based. So props to you. I'm really enjoying this.
Thank you.
But I was enjoying it so much. Tell me your question one more time.
It's okay. We were talking about when you and I first met, you had mentioned that the business side of things, surprisingly, you were surprised that you enjoyed building the business so much. So I would just love to hear, kind of how that came about and maybe what you love about it.
Yeah. So, and here's something for if you're listening right now and there is something that you are now or were before a little scared of, but you felt like, oh, I should do this, but no, I'm too scared. That was me. So when I first graduated college, I was a first generation student. I come from a family where my mom suffers from schizophrenia. My childhood, there was a lot of abuse. It was just a lot of craziness, right? Well, I go into college and I get a degree in business because I don't know. I'm just like, everybody does business. As a Latino first generation student, I can tell you most of us are like business or engineering because that's what makes money, right? Yeah. I was poor before, but I'm going to be rich now. Aww. Well, I do all this. I go to school and do all that. But then it's time to get a job. And all I think of is corporate America, big suits, glass windows, hired one day, fired the next. Like I think of just the intense competition I see on the TV on Wall Street. And it just scared the pants off me. I was like, oh no, and higher ed was, I had a mentor that was amazing. She was opening doors for me. She's like my mom. I mean, I absolutely love her. Shout out Rebecca. But so I didn't go into business, but something appealed to me. And I didn't realize until later that I loved my career in higher ed. I loved helping students. It was so close to my heart. But I can love more than one thing. And once I stepped into business, I realized there's administration and marketing and hiring. I just hired my first, employee, my first team member. And I absolutely love her. She's so amazing. Shout out Denise. So yeah, And what I realized is I want to say, I'm good at this. I'm just going to say it. Like,
yes,
I'm good at this, right? And I was scared of it. And yeah, it's really hard. It is. It's really, really hard work. And sometimes you don't see the outcome because it's a lot of experimenting. It's very much an entrepreneurial mindset. And you just got to keep trying publicly, right? And people see you stumble and, that project didn't work, And then you're like, cool, at least I tried. Let's try the next thing, right? And so that's what I really like about it. I really like that it's kind of my own.
Yeah.
I really like that I took what I was once kind of afraid to do, but it gave me a little like spark. And I just said, to heck with it. Like, I'm just going to do the thing. I'm going to do it scared. I'm going to mess up as I go. And you can feel free to look on my LinkedIn. You can see the first few posts and you can be like, ooh, that's a little cringy. Or the first few podcasts, oh, that's a little cringy. And it's true, like you always have to get past the cringe, whatever that is, because what you're getting past, and yeah, it's public. So what? Guess what? In the beginning, no one's listening to you. Nobody cares, right? But it's that like that piece of cringe, I call it. When I listen to that, what I'm listening to is growing pains, right? It's like imposter syndrome. When people are like, oh, I have imposter syndrome, I'm like, that is good. And they're like, what? Why is that good? I'm like, because you don't get imposter syndrome when you're the big fish in the small pond.
Right. You're stretching.
Right. Yeah. You get imposter syndrome when you decide to be in a space where you have a lot to learn. So that's a good thing. That means you're growing. Right. So that's.
Yeah, I love this story. So one of the things that really jumped out at me that I can't help but not mention is the spark that you had for the business degree at a young age. So we all go to school, we're 17, 18 usually, and we have to pick this topic that we supposedly have to do throughout our careers. And we just never know what that's going to look like. We're super young. You don't even know who you are at that age. And I say this all the time. It's a lot of pressure. But this is really interesting because you had that spark for the business degree, took a meandering path through higher ed, which was very valuable, clearly.
Oh, yeah.
And still had that spark years later. And now using, the business mindset, the business degree, the business work that you learned in school to start your own business. So I think that's just like something for people to consider. And actually, when I talk to folks around career clarity, I do ask them like, hey, did you go to college? Like, if so, what was your degree? Why did you pick that degree? Because there's usually something hidden back in there that wants to come forward when you're feeling stuck. So it's a big piece of it.
What you're talking about right now, and this is why I think people absolutely love you in your heart-based method, is because so many clients sometimes come and are like, okay, what's the career for me? Tell me, right?
Yes.
And I feel like some of the work that I do, and I can feel it, some of the work that you do is very powerfully, like you help them to see themselves through past situations, past reactions, past decisions, right? And it just becomes clearer and clearer. So I just think that's a beautiful way of bringing it together.
Yeah, for sure. I learned a long time ago that when I first started coaching, I don't have the answers for you. You have the answers, but I will help you get the answers, by asking the questions and showcasing some frameworks and things like that. But yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's an interesting piece. I mean, that's probably a whole nother topic for a podcast, is being a coach and knowing that you don't have the answers and working with somebody to kind of get them on a path, especially if they're stuck or unsure. So that's a whole nother thing. But actually, leading to the next question I wanted to ask you is if you could give us a little peek into the day in the life of an executive coach and a podcast host. I would love to just kind of hear what goes on in your day to day and kind of what your process is, if you're open to sharing.
Oh my gosh, I love operations. Like I just love. I mean, it sounds like it's like operations for a big company, but I call it operations even if it's just me and my back cave. But so right now, like I said, I just hired this wonderful employee, and so now that we're settling into our rhythm, I meet with her on Monday mornings to kick off our week for the both of us. And we do partially, red, yellow, green, where we stick on very practical things. And then we get into, a couple of questions about values just to keep us focused on who we are and why we do things.
That's great.
And then we, chat about, things that can only be done in a meeting, right? Things that I don't need to just email. And that's things like, how do we devise a LinkedIn strategy? How do we, what's the opportunity that's coming up? What are the skills you want to learn? That type of thing. So that's our Monday meeting. But then the rest of the week, I have coaching on 2 days. So I leave Mondays and Wednesdays open. So I coach on Mondays and Wednesdays. Anytime where I have a slot that's open or in the mornings before 11, I don't coach. That's all my client prep time. So I get ready for clients. I, review where they are in their progress, look at their pre-work session notes, look up articles or whatever it might be that I can help them with. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays is my day for like deep work. This tends to be things like, sometimes I just go out and take a walk and just think like, okay, what's the next step? Or what, like I just let my brain just kind of, simmer. And usually something floats to the top of like, you need to go back and refocus on this, or this piece is missing or whatnot. And then, the rest of the time on Tuesdays and Thursdays is content. So it's work for the podcast, coming up with content for a blog article, recording, like we're recording now on a Thursday. Or also, I do a lot of, and I'm sure we both do this, but I like having a lot of tools in my toolbox. And so I'm often reading a new book on some part of the career process or on coaching. And then I usually like to write up like little toolkits to then use for my clients, which then goes into podcast episodes and blogs and blah, blah, blah. So Tuesdays, Thursdays are content. And then on Fridays is, I have a meeting with a mentor that is working with me. Awesome. I love him. Thank you, Jose Maria. You know how I like to shout out people? I'm like, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
This podcast episode has the most shout outs. We're going to have to tag everybody when it goes out. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. I just think, because I think, this work, you don't do it alone. And every time I see someone who is a coach or a creator or a business owner, you see the face of them, but there's like something to appreciating everybody that was involved in creating what's here now, whether through like personal interaction or actual work that's getting done within the business. But yeah, so that's Fridays. I talk to other coaches. I talk to my mentor. I'll have intro calls on Fridays. And then I'm off on Fridays at about 1:00 and start taking care of the weekend things at home.
Yes. And that's where I'm hearing here some pretty strict boundaries, which I love hearing, because it's easy when you're a business owner just to like open the floodgates, do whatever you can for your clients, make all kinds. I did that in the beginning of career coaching when I was working a full-time job. I was like, any place I could fit in, nights, weekends, anything, you name it, I was trying to fit in for clients just to like do as much as I could, but it just takes a toll. So it's impressive how you've blocked out your week and, having certain days for certain things and having a theme for that, I think can be really helpful in terms of keeping focus and the productivity and to keep moving forward. And then to have the variety, like the Monday, Wednesday versus Tuesday, Thursday is really nice. And then giving yourself a break on Friday afternoon and going into the weekend so you can have a fresh start on Monday. So congratulations to you for setting that structure in that week. And I'm proud of you for that. That's a big deal.
Well, thank you. But I also guarantee you that I had that same season you had, where I was just like, anyone, anywhere want to talk to me? We all start somewhere.
We all start somewhere. This is true. We learn from our mistakes there, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, my friend, I'd love to hear just a little bit inside your process as a coach. So how do you love to help people? Frameworks, we talked about mindset a little bit. So tell me a little more there.
Oh gosh. Yes. I love this question. So especially in the beginning, it was like, I'll help you on whatever you need day to day. This is fully bespoke, fully custom, right? And I realized that there is a lot of customization in sort of the pace that we go at, but the process tends to be very, very similar across the board. And so typically on our, if you have a complimentary call with me, it is not, I don't think of it as a sales call. I actually don't sell on it. It's very much like, let me just learn about you. And it's really less of me talking to them and more of them talking to me. So I just ask a ton of questions, get to know the practical issue, but then also get to know like, where are we perspective-wise? Where are we in terms of what do we feel is stopping us in terms of a practical barrier, but also like an internal barrier? Is there something that usually when you reach out to a coach, there's like something that you're like, I need more than what YouTube can offer, And so we try to get at that. Like, what is that? What would the vision be for what our work together would be? but almost everybody wants to work on the resume like day one.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yes. I hear
And
this
I'm like,
on the daily.
I love your, I love your pace. I love your, level of activity. I'm like, but if I could suggest, if we get so crystal clear that it's going to feel like we take longer in the beginning, going back to that slow down to speed up, it's going to feel like we're taking a long time in the beginning. And I always have this. I always have clients who are like, because I'll ask them, how's coaching going every once in a while? Mm-hmm. And they're like, I feel like it's taking too long. Yeah. And I'm like, you're in the right place.
And so we'll spend
time. Exactly. We'll spend time getting clarity. That will involve some networking, going out, getting the pulse on the market, getting like a little bit of like fire, like some life from another person who's in the field.
That's good.
And sometimes we do some interviews with folks that know you really, really well, that mentor who's consistently over time open doors for you. You go to them and you ask them, and this is actually not me. There's nothing new under the sun. This is a book called The Introvert's Edge to Networking by Matthew Pollard.
Ooh, excellent.
It is really good. And at the beginning, he talks about the fact that whether you're a business or an employee, when you come up with your brand, which everybody needs now, you don't actually know what your positioning is. Mm-hmm. You go to the people who have stuck with you over time and you ask them, why have you have so many options? Why have you stuck with me over time? And the value they'll give you at first is like, oh, because you do great work. Well, yeah, but why is it different
one layer
from
deeper.
The other people or from the other businesses? And you get gold from those conversations. And so between that, our brand building sessions, our clarity sessions, we then start to figure out your position in the market, right? What kinds of jobs are you looking for? What types of industries need you most? At what juncture in the company's life cycle, are you most valuable? There's some folks that are really good at R&D, research and development. And so a lot of times they're looking at innovative companies or newer companies. Then you have folks who are really good at standardization, ISO standards, mass production, right? I work with sometimes a good amount of engineers. And so then it's like, okay, we're looking at really big companies, right? And if not, if you have a gap, what companies could help you fill that gap? So we get that clarity. From there, it just kind of slides on down. From clarity, we work on branding, which is a career story that you can tell in about 45 seconds, but it's jam-packed. Those 45 seconds takes us like 10 hours to create. So we create that career story. We develop your resume. We do a LinkedIn audit and revision. If you need a portfolio, we do some feedback. But like you said, especially on the portfolio, this is your industry. It's your career. And it also is a reflection of where you want to go. And so often people are like, what do I put on my portfolio? And I'm like, what do you think you should put on your portfolio?
Exactly.
And we kind of coach through those. But once the branding is totally done, then we go back into networking. But it's kind of very much an outreach. It's a lot of outreach where the applications kind of take a back seat and you focus on outreach. And then, hiring managers will ask you to apply. And that's when okay, now it's time to apply. And I never have to tell someone, oh, don't forget to apply. Like I don't even spend time on it because I know that people are going to just apply to jobs no matter what. And so I really focus on the networking piece.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Listeners, if you are looking for a full service coach, Patricia has a lot to offer. She is spot on with this framework and the way that you go about kind of thinking about change and getting super clear first. I totally agree. People all the time, I want to make a change. I got to update my resume. Okay, what do you want to do? I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to update your resume if you don't know what you want to do because, as you mentioned, the professional brand is so important and it has to tell a story. And if it doesn't tell a story, you're not going to get recognized. And then when you talk to people, you can share that story versus just repeating everything that you've ever done in your career. We've got to kind of, like we were talking in the beginning, connect those dots. So yes, this sounds very robust. And I know people would be in very good hands working with you. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your process and how that works because it's really good. It's very robust. So, and I think a lot of coaches too focus on like just the resume or they focus on just interview prep or they focus just on the clarity and the mindset piece. But here you've got soup to nuts, like full spectrum. So I think that's very valuable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So as we come to a close here, I always like to ask folks for their flourishing favorite. Now, I know you just mentioned a book, The Introvert's Guide to Networking, which we'll definitely add to the show notes. But do you have any other recommendations or podcasts or anything that's helped folks or helped you that you would like to recommend to folks?
Oh, gosh. The Introvert's Edge is really, really good. Zebra Code by Andrew LaCivita is a really good book. I have it right here. It's a step-by-step guide to mastering career skills that make you a standout professional.
Ooh, I have to check that one out.
He has and I've gone through his program, like I said, toolbox, right?
Yes.
Of course, I emailed him. The rule follower that I am, I emailed him. Sometimes I'm a rule follower. And I was like, hey, is it okay if a career coach grabs, and he's like, yes.
Of course.
So that's a good one.
Excellent. Well, Patricia, thank you for joining me today and for sharing all of this wisdom with our listeners. It has been such a joy. Your insights and personal experiences really brought a lot to the table. So thank you.
No, it was such a pleasure. And I absolutely I went through your website. I love your website. I love your podcast. Your community is really blessed. And so I'm honored to be a part of it.
You are so sweet. Thank you. And before we wrap up, I want to make sure everyone knows where to find more of Patricia's incredible insights. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to check out her podcast, The Uncommon Career, on any podcast platform. Patricia also shares a ton of excellent content on LinkedIn, so definitely connect with her over there. And if you're looking for help with career clarity, interview prep, or need some resume tips, Patricia has multiple free gifts available for you at theUncommonCareer.com/welcome. And I will make sure all of these links are in the show notes. As always, the notes from today's episode will be on the blog at flourish.careers/blog. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.